talking about white privilege. Does white privilege exist? Is it real? We're going to talk about a little bit what the Democrats are saying about it in relation to institutional racism. Really interesting stuff. But before we get in, I want to play a cut just to kind of set the tone for this and give people an idea for where we're going to go with this. Let's play cut one.
To already live in that reality. We have a state action against our police department, which gives us legal mechanisms in the very short term. You know, there's lessons from all over the country, all over the world that we're looking to take immediate steps while we work toward building the systems that we would need to imagine that future.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done. And
So that clip, that was actually Minneapolis City Council President Lisa Bender. She was on CNN, and she's asked about their city's plan to dismantle their police force. And she was asked a pretty pointed question: what do you say to the people who are nervous about not being able to call the police if their homes are burglarized? And her answer, as you just heard, was essentially to say that it's white privilege to be able to call the police when your house is burglarized, and now they're just essentially leveling the playing field, and people should understand what it's like to be black in America, which apparently, according to her, again, this is a Minneapolis City Councilwoman, apparently if you're black and you call the police, just no one ever comes. So I want to talk about this today, because we've talked about the defunding of the police, and Democrats have scrambled to try and explain their position on that, which is insane, the idea of just getting rid of police officers. But now we're seeing that they're branding policing, they're branding the ability to have a law enforcement officer come to your home if you're attacked or burglarized. They're branding that as white privilege. So I want to talk about that today, because I don't know about you, Joe, but personally, I don't believe that white privilege exists in the sense that every white person in every element of their day enjoys a privilege that helps them get ahead over anyone who's not white, a black person, Hispanic, whatever. The idea that white privilege is that pervasive, I don't believe in it. I do believe that you can point, just like we can point to individual racists on police forces, I do think you can point to individual instances where it is clearly in this country better to be a white man or a white woman going through this than a black man or black woman going through this. I can also point to things like Harvard admissions, where if you're black, you have a better chance of getting into Harvard than if you were white. So this exists all across our society. But the notion that white privilege, everyone who has pale skin color has to apologize for slavery, I just don't buy it. So I want to talk about that today. We're going to get into a little bit about what this defund the police would look like, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how the modern left is branding white privilege. But personally, Joe, there might be daylight between us, but I don't believe in white privilege as this all-encompassing notion.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two ways to look at it, right? And actually, there's more than two ways to look at it, but I'm going to look at it this way. One, that every person should apologize for things that have been done to them by other white people, right? And the reality of it is that I'm not going to apologize for the bad behavior of how other people treat people, because I didn't do it. And
yeah,
you know, if you go back in the history of my family, I mean, my great grandfather, my dad was in the Army. My grandfather was served in World War II. My great grandfather was actually he was German. He fought in World War I, just not for the U.S. And the other side of my family fought to end slavery, right? And yet I have to apologize for who I am, because there's bad people out there. Now, I want everybody to hear me on this. I believe we have a systemic issue inside of our legal system that bends towards or bends against blacks. I truly believe that happens.
Yeah, we've gone through that. There's a difference, though, between saying that if you're a black person going into a court system, you're more likely to be prosecuted or convicted of a crime. What we're talking about is in your everyday life, white people enjoy a benefit, enjoy perks, simply because they are white, that they would never experience had they have some other skin color. So I don't want to get bogged down into the judicial aspects of it, because that actually isn't what people are talking about when they talk about white privilege exclusively. They're talking about when you walk into a store, you're treated better, right? When you go to a restaurant, the waiter's nicer to you, right? All these different things is easier to get into schools. That's the claim.
Look, I'm going to tell you that it may. Well, you don't buy it, but let me be the arbiter of your reality. Okay, there are people that walk into a store that are treated better because they're white than if they were black. That does happen.
And that's fine. And I actually know store owners. When I was in high school, there was a store that was actually owned by a Chinese family, and they were very, very, very cautious when black people would walk into their store. And the reason for that is because they were robbed. They were robbed by teenagers, black teenagers from the local high school. So they get very, very nervous. So the issue is that we're talking about two separate things. We're talking about prejudices, and we're talking about white privilege. This idea that if you're white, you all of a sudden have a leg up over everyone else, I just don't buy it, because you can go all across this country and you can find trailer parks that are full of white people, right? The notion that they achieve this through their privilege, it's laughable. And the idea that white people need to apologize, white people who've never owned slaves have to apologize to black people who were never slaves themselves. It's laughable. And we see the videos of white liberals bowing down and apologizing. It's all very theatrical. I just don't buy it in the sense that that all white people should have to apologize for their whiteness and should have to just like admit that for some reason they've gotten a leg up on society. I don't buy it. We can talk about institutional, we can talk about individual things, like you want to talk about the judicial system, fine.
This is a hard subject for me.
I know, but this idea that everywhere you walk, everything you do, white people get a smile, and if you're brown, you automatically get a frown. I don't buy it. And that's not just because I haven't seen things like this with my own eyes. I've seen people get discriminated against. I have. But I've also seen people apply to Harvard who are white, they get declined, and someone's accepted and they're black and they had a much lower SAT score, right? So this idea that your whiteness all of a sudden bestows a benefit to you in all cases, it's just, factually it isn't true, and I don't even buy it like from a figurative level.
Well, this is where you and I are going to differ. Now, I don't believe that it's privilege. I believe it's institutional, right? I believe that there are stereotypes that get built, and those stereotypes actually influences people's behavior towards blacks. Now, just to say it's privilege, I don't know. Like I don't think you could call it privilege because, but I also think that we have trouble seeing it. Like white people have trouble seeing what someone who's black goes through. We have trouble seeing it. Now, I happen to sit right in the middle of all of it, and I have a very interracial family. We've already talked about this many, many times, and I think that there's something to the fact that opportunities don't knock at the door at the same rate for blacks as they do for whites. I think that's true. I think it's 100% true. Now, am I going to apologize for the fact that other people act that way? No, I probably won't. But do I try to be a good example to others to push the fact that stereotype is not true? I do. I go out of my way to do it. And if you look at our company is very diverse for not because I went out of my way to make it diverse. It's diverse because the best person got the job.
Yeah.
Right? And so
here's the issue. The issue though is when you actually look at the data, and Ben Shapiro has a great bit on this where he talks about this. When you actually look at the data, your skin color plays much less of a role in how you succeed in life than the choices you make. So when you actually look at the results in the data, whether or not you enter the middle class it tends to be determined by three factors: whether you finish high school, whether you get a job, and whether you have a baby out of wedlock. If you do not finish high school, if you do not get a job, and if you have a child out of wedlock, your odds of not reaching the middle class are much slimmer, right? It's much harder to reach the middle class. If you finish high school, if you get a job, and if you wait to have children until you're married, almost everyone in that case, I think it's just a couple percent, don't make it into the middle class. And that's why we see people in like Appalachia, right? White people in Appalachia living in poverty. It's not because of their skin color. If they had white privilege, you would think that they wouldn't be in the conditions that they're living in. But they're there not because of skin color. They're there because of choices and decisions that they made. Some of them were thrust upon them. Some of them they have no choice about. But the skin color ultimately plays less of a role than the decisions they make. And the unfortunate truth is that in the black community, the black community has higher rates of high school dropouts. They have a higher rate of unplanned pregnancies out of wedlock, and they have higher unemployment rates, right? So when you look at those three factors, they are much more predictive of whether or not you'll succeed in life than just the pure color of your skin. And I'm not going to deny that there was significant discrimination in this country in the past. But in today's world, whether or not you are white or black does not play as big of a role in your success in your future as the decisions you make. And that's my position on it.
You're wrong. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you because for a lot of reasons. One of which is I inject myself into environments that I probably have no business injecting myself into, right? I am a conservative, 100%, unapologetically. I am pro-life, 100%. I believe we're a nation of laws on the immigration side. I believe that illegal immigration is a harm to our country. I believe those things. Now, I can believe those things and still feel that our government itself has done things to harm us as a populace, that they're not trying to fix the problems with the immigration system, which would make it easier and or at least more transparent in who gets a citizenship and who doesn't. I believe that there's some economic benefit for the government for allowing illegal immigration to occur. I believe that it creates chaos inside of our society because we
don't want to go too far down the illegal immigration rabbit hole.
Because hold on, I don't want to just go to that rabbit hole. I want to go to all the rabbit holes because we don't
want to go down any rabbit holes.
They all interconnect, Max. They all come back to a place where the government has never done anything well, right? And yet we try to we put ourselves in a position where we're trying to say that something doesn't exist while I'm sitting here watching things happen which prove the theory outside of the quote unquote statistics. And
so how does white privilege exist if it's easier for a black man to get into Harvard?
Yeah, so I would not call it privilege, but I would say that there is. I wouldn't call it privilege because I don't think it applies to everyone, right? But I would say
then white
that there's
privilege
a
doesn't
propensity.
exist.
But I would say there's a propensity that white people have different experiences, are treated differently in a lot of different environments because those stereotypes that have been created. And by the way, most of it's been created by the liberal left Hollywood, right? It creates those stereotypes. And by the way, most of the issues that we're seeing that come out where blacks are treated badly, at least where they're killed, you know where they happen? They happen in liberal environments. And then they want to defund the police. A different topic. But
yeah.
So hold on. Let me finish.
Here's the question.
So just Friday or Thursday, I met with a young man, sat down in my office, right? He's black, he's young, he's articulate, graduated from college.
Yeah, you mentioned this. You mentioned this on Friday.
Yeah, so this guy, 100% of the time, the reason why he did not get into his chosen field had everything to do with the fact that he was passed over because he's black. 100%.
How can you possibly know that? How can you possibly know that?
Because I hire and lead people every day.
No, but how can you possibly know that?
Because
So you're calling every single person on an application board anywhere he's ever applied racist? I mean, that's what we're talking about when you say things like that.
Yeah,
and
I could say that.
It's fine for him to believe that, but there's zero evidence to suggest that everyone on college boards are racist, because the actual evidence suggests
What are you
that
saying,
it's
college
easier
boards?
to get
I
into
mean,
a college
I didn't say
university.
college. I said he applied for jobs afterwards and did not receive one offer from any of those. He
So,
didn't.
so every single hiring manager that ever looked at his resume is a racist?
No,
I mean,
I think it,
that-
I
that's the
actually think
hard-
I actually think that we don't know. We actually don't know. But I know from spending an hour of time with him, or an hour and a half of time with him, that he had a very smart, articulate, transparent individual that, frankly, just chose a different field of study and actually was going back to school to get a degree in that, because he said that I had a better opportunity of actually succeeding in that realm, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're
The
sitting here
problem
telling me
is
it
that-
doesn't.
Well,
Max,
I'm telling
my
you it
problem
doesn't
is
exist.
this. My problem is this with what you said, and this happens across the board. You have apologists on the left, right, that say, "Oh, you're right. It's white privilege, right? We want to support you, and yeah, you're right. This is not, that this is absolutely white privilege." Then you have the people in the middle that say, "No, it's just not right, right? It's not right how you're treated. I want to treat you the same way that I'd expect you to treat me, regardless of skin color." And then you have the other extreme that says, white privilege doesn't exist. You get what opportunities you should have, and if you work hard, you'll get every one of those opportunities. And Max, it's just not true. But you come from a family that.
No, first of all, I come from a family where I'm the first person in my family to go to college. So I understand the arguments, but I had to work really hard to get into college, right? To go to the college of my choice. So I have, and I know a lot of people in college who got in through affirmative action. So, I mean, that's a whole other argument, though. I can't understand how white privilege exists. If he is better in all instances to be white, that you have a privilege that comes from the basis of white. If white privilege exists, why is Elizabeth Warren trying to pretend to be Native American? Why is Rachel Dolezal pretending to be black? Why is Sean King, Talcum X, pretending to be black when he's white? Right? I can go through all of these examples of people pretending to be other races in order to get ahead.
Agreed.
Like, we know that Elizabeth Warren filed as a Native American for a benefit, right? She was listed as the first woman of color protester. I believe it was at Harvard when she was teaching there. She was listed as the first female person of color in their staff, right? Why is it that white people have to pretend to be other races to get ahead if they have privilege, right? And that's where I have a hard time wrapping my head around this, because if white privilege existed in this totality argument that in every aspect of your day's better off because
I
you're
didn't
white,
say that.
we wouldn't.
I didn't say that.
Well, I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying
I
that's
didn't
what
say
the
that.
argument from the left is. That's what the argument from the left is, that if you're white, you have a basic privilege that helps you in every aspect of your day. If that was true, we wouldn't see white people pretending to be black. We wouldn't see white people pretending to be Native American in order to get ahead in life, right? It doesn't mesh, right? You can't have both. You can't say that you have white privilege and you also have more privileges if you pretend to be another race. It can't be both ways. And again, there's no doubt in my mind that there are situationally that we can point to instances where you are better off to be white than black. And whether that's institutional, which I disagree, or just the fact that there are racist cops out there, you can point to that. But this idea that, and it's not your idea, it's the radical left's idea, that you are white, you have white privilege simply by expecting a police officer to come to your home if it's broken into, and that you should walk a mile in the black community's shoes and get burglarized without police to understand their suffering, their pain. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And it isn't provable, right? And that's the problem I have. It's that when I say I don't believe in white privilege, I hear anecdotes, not just from you, I hear anecdotes from other people, which again, I understand. But you can't have white privilege if you also have instances where it pays not to be white, right? And there are many. And that's the biggest problem I have with this. It's if Elizabeth Warren benefits by calling herself Native American, then she can't also have white privilege.
Look, we're having a conversation about a word that literally is dividing us, or words that are dividing us in white privilege, right? We're having that conversation, right? You're saying that white privilege exists. I'm saying, hey, look, white privilege,
I'm saying it
I
doesn't
wouldn't call it
exist.
white privilege. It doesn't exist. I'm not calling it white privilege, but I'm telling you that there are opportunities where it is better to be white than it is to be black, right? There is.
Yes, and,
I mean,
and there are places where it's better to be black than it is to be white, and there's
100%.
places where it's better to be a Native American or Hispanic. It exists across the board. White privilege, though, definitionally it's this idea that everyone who's white just has a better life because they're white.
But the point is that it comes from a perspective of reality. Everyone's reality is different, right? And we see it from a different lens. So you see it from a different lens, and I see it from a different lens. That someone who is black sees it from a different lens. Everyone sees it from a different lens, right? And you know, we're having a conversation about white privilege, and frankly, I think it's absurd that we concentrate on things and we forget about the problem. We forget about it. Like the police are not even the problem. You know, bad police officers are just like bad plumbers. That are just like bad lawyers. That are like bad doctors. There are bad ones out there.
Bad police officers are a little bit worse than bad plumbers.
Not if they hit you with a wrench.
If you hire a bad plumber, you get a leak. If you interact with a bad police officer, you get killed. So there is degrees of separation there. The issue I have is that
wait a minute. Hold on. Let me finish what I had to say. Let me finish what I had to say, right? Because police officers do the bidding of the city or county or municipality that they represent. So they are overseen by a mayor. They're overseen by a council, right? And so those are the people that let it happen, right? We want to say that police officers are bad. There are bad police officers. Most police officers are not bad. Inherently, most are not. There are bad apples. But those bad apples never get weeded out. And they never get weeded out because there's no system that allows for it to happen. You have police unions that come in that absolutely defend a bad police officer, even though time and time and time again, that police officer does bad things, yet they just let it happen. And the mayors let it happen. And then the mayors cry foul and say it's all the police officer's fault when you put on your uniform, you have to represent the city, which is run by the leadership that does nothing. They're anemic. And then what's happening in Minneapolis, same thing. They all want to say it's all the police's fault. No, it's not. It's not the police's fault. It's the politicians' fault. It's the government's fault because the police officers represent them. They represent them. So we never get to the problem. We never get to the actual issue. They have judges out there that are statistically sending blacks away to jail longer than they are whites. It's not me. I'm not just saying that. It's true. But we don't talk about the judges. We just keep putting them back in their seats where they reign above us. We don't talk about the prosecutors that hide evidence, knowing that they're putting someone away for a longer period of time. It's absolutely evil. The entire system, by the way, is not designed to inherently bring justice. It's just not. So we're having a conversation about white privilege. I think it's idiotic. I think if you want to solve the problem, just don't be a racist. Be a good human being. It's really simple. I met a lot of white people that are amazing. I met a lot of black people that are amazing. But yet we sit here and we let people mule us into arguments that is subjective. It's based on your experience. There are people that have had bad experiences with white people. There are just as many people that have bad experiences with black people. But you walk around in Hollywood and you put up billboards and movies that depict people in different races as having the propensity to do things, and then that's all you see in the media because if it bleeds, it leads. What do you expect people to do? What do you expect people to feel? Right? I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. We're having these discussions about, we're having this discussion about how people see things, and some people see the narrative. It's only a narrative of a select group. We act like all black people believe that you have white privilege. They don't. They don't.
No,
all white people believe in.
It's predominantly a liberal white archetype. Here's the problem I have. Of the
it's
four
a liberal,
police officers,
loony left.
Here's the problem I have. Of the 4 police officers who are now arrested for killing George Floyd, one of them kneeled on his neck. The other 3 stood by. They've also been charged in the murder. Of that, one of them is Asian, and another one is black. So how is it, like, I don't accept that George Floyd was killed out of white privilege, and that if he was white, he would have had a better circumstance if one of his actual police officers being charged in his murder was black and the other one's Asian. That's the challenge I have. And to say that white privilege or whatever you want to call it is at work in these cities, like there hasn't been a Republican mayor of Minneapolis since I think the 30s. You go to Baltimore, you have a black mayor, a black district attorney, a black police chief, right? To say that white privilege is responsible for black people having a worse time, worse run-ins with police, when everyone in a position of power to decide the policies in the police department are black, it's harder for me to wrap my head around that.
Do you know what the crime rate increase is in Minneapolis over the last 5 years?
I don't know. I think that I was looking. I think that there's only been eight unjustified police killings in the last couple of years.
Minneapolis,
I don't know
though,
what the
crime rate is up like 300%.
Yes,
it's absurd.
Yeah,
the crime rate there. I mean, it's absurd. And I mean, you see pictures of them burning out buildings and destroying and looting businesses. I mean, it looks like a worse. You know, I've been in the Middle East. I've been in places that have been bombed. It looks that bad.
Yeah, I mean, let's play that clip. We have a clip of what it looks like after the so-called protest in Minneapolis. Let's go to cut 2.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So the problem I have with that footage is when you hear people talk about white privilege or whatever you want to call it, they talk about things like food deserts, where if you live in an inner city in a black neighborhood, you have worse accessibility to fresh foods, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, because there's less grocery stores in your community, right? And they've done studies where they put black high schoolers and white high schoolers in the same room and shown them pictures of fruits and vegetables, and it is shocking just how little exposure African American students, even at the high school level, have to basic fruits and vegetables, like things like cucumbers and squash. It's shocking. But then when you see that footage of Minneapolis and you see that they torched a Walgreens, an actual like little miniature grocery store in the community, right? When you see that, I don't buy that it's white privilege is the reason that they don't have access to fruits and vegetables, at least in that neighborhood, because it was burned down by rioters on the first nights of protests. Those places were burned to the ground and looted, and you see there are plenty of videos online of black restaurant owners like crying after their restaurants have been torched and broken into. It's heartbreaking. The argument, though, that their reality, that they're only in that position because they're black, and if only they were white, they would have a better life. Again, I don't buy it, because with that, and I'll go back to something you said. You met this kid, and he explained to you how he applied to a bunch of jobs and didn't get the jobs that he wanted. Hearing that story, I can't just jump and say, well, it's because he's black. I can't just jump there. And now I'm sure other people might have a different experience with it. I can't do it because in the past I've applied for jobs that I didn't get, and it wasn't because I was white, right? The argument that white people automatically get the jobs they want and black people don't, it just isn't true.
You're missing my point, because I got interrupted, right? So, and I have people telling me that I believe that white people are racist, right? That's not true. So let me just clarify something. He absolutely did not get a job, right, or many jobs, because he was black. I listened to his entire story. I don't. You know what? That's my reality based upon everything that I had in front of me, the jobs that he applied. Well, I asked him questions, but it doesn't matter if it's not your truth. That's my point. So let me finish. It doesn't matter if it's not your truth, Max. It's his truth, and I see it as truth. And actually, he didn't even tell me that. I saw it, looked at him, and said, "Oh my gosh." I go, "Why didn't you get into the field that you were in?" He goes, "I couldn't find a job." Then I walked through and said, "Send me your resume." After it was all said and done with, I said, "Send me your resume." And the reason why I wanted to send him a resume is because I wanted to give him an opportunity. I wanted to see if I saw something different or if someone else saw something different than what I saw, right? Now, I'm not telling you this is happening all the time. I'm telling you that was the truth in his eyes. That was the reality in his eyes. That was the reality in my eyes. Do I think everyone gets passed over for opportunities? No, of course I don't, right? Do I think white privilege is a thing that propelled me to where I am today? No, I think hard work got me to where I am today. I think everything I have is because I put in 12 to 15 hours a day, worked my tail off to have everything I have today. Right? Somebody going to tell me I got it because I was white? I'll tell you straight up, it's not even possible.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
No.
And I think we're talking past each other, because it's the idea, white privilege is not just saying that white people get advantages in some parts of their life. White privilege is the notion that you need to apologize for what you have because you only got there because you're white. It's actually a means of silencing people, of shutting people up.
You will never see me get on my knee.
It's like what you hear. It's like what you hear from feminists. If a man tries to talk to them about something, they say it's mansplaining and that you have no right to enter the discussion because you're a man and your perspective is irrelevant. They call it mansplaining. White privilege is the equivalent when it comes to discussions 100%. Over race.
100%.
That you are not allowed to talk about it because you only got to where you are by white privilege. And therefore, you just need to remain silent. It's a mechanism to silence people, just like mansplaining
absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is. I think that we're kind of crossing each other at an intersection. I did not say I believe in white privilege. What I said is, and let me just repeat myself, what I said is, and by the way, the amount of manipulation that happens today is unbelievable, and on every subject, right? And they have a name for you if you don't agree with them on nearly every subject. That's the new passive aggressiveness. So, but what I said is that there are certain times, and you said it before, there are certain times that it's better to be black than it is to be white. Absolutely, right? But there are certain times that there are benefits that we have from being white, and I won't apologize for it. I won't get on my knee. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I didn't do anything to you or the next guy or the next guy. Black, white, green, purple, yellow. I don't care who you are, right? You will earn my respect for the character of who you are. You will not earn it by what color you are. I sure as hell am not going to apologize for something somebody else did to you or didn't do to you, right? But those are the excuses that they use in order to hold down an entire community, right? They use those as excuses. They actually tell black people that you're at a disadvantage so that when they don't succeed, it's because, it's all their fault. It's because of white privilege. That's what's happening, Max.
So how is that any different than the young man that you talked to? Because I didn't meet him. But the way I hear it is that he didn't get the jobs he wants. And I hear a story almost identical to what you just said, that if you don't succeed, it's because you're not white. The fact that you talked to him and got to know him and were able to make a decision without race coming into it at all, I don't understand how you can jump to the assumption that everyone else who talked to him or saw his resume, that race did play a factor.
Well, look, we'd be foolish.
To be systemic, it should have been involved in your companies, right?
All right, so hold on a second, time out. Our company is a lot. We have a lot of people. I'm not going to tell you about how many companies, how many people. We have a lot of people, like well over 100, right? And well over 100, in all the companies. Our rate of people inside the company, men to women, we're 71% women, right? In this company, in all the companies. We are 27.6%, as of this morning, 27.6% minority in this company, right? If you go into the tech world, it's less than 3%. And most of those tech world jobs, this is characterization that I don't have statistics on, but the characterization that I see out there is that they come from India, right? They get H-1Bs, come over here, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
So why is it that our company looks like the United Nations, yet most of the other companies that we have out there that do the same thing we do have a rate that is 500, 1,000 times less than what we have here? And
Sure.
I'm not telling you it's not
what-
true. I'm not telling you, it's hard for me to sit here on one side and say that, and then the other side is that we have personality tests, we have blind interviews, we have all these things that I think, help just figure out who's the best person for the position, right? We built those for a reason. But why is it that our company looks the way it does, and yet other companies out, and I don't do the hiring. I'm not I don't do the hiring. There's a crew of what, 8, 10 people that hire people here? Why is it that we look so much different if there isn't a systemic issue? And I'm not going to call it white privilege, but that's why I look at this young man.
Sure.
And I'm like, man, this kid is, I think he should work with us.
Sure. So having some experience with the hiring in the company, I know that everyone who goes into it makes an effort to make sure that it's completely blind of anyone's gender or race or ethnicity,
Yeah.
And that there's an effort put forward to make sure that we have a diverse workforce.
Yep.
The challenge is, and I'll get back to what I talked to in the beginning, the reason that African Americans do not work in Silicon Valley is because largely African Americans do not have the skill set to work in Silicon Valley. Some do, but the majority do not. When you look at this section of our population, we talked in the beginning that they have the highest likelihood of dropping out of high school, the highest likelihood of having a child out of wedlock, right? 2 of those decisions, either something that they decide themselves or was thrust upon them,
Right.
2 of those decisions, life moments that make it harder to enter the middle class. If a black student drops out of high school, they're not going to get a job in Silicon Valley in machine learning. It just isn't going to happen, right?
I agree.
So,
yeah, you get a job based on the experience you have.
Based on the experience you have,
Right.
right? So we can talk about ways to make sure that black students finish high school, get their degree, right? We can have those conversations, but suggesting that every tech company, and it's not just you, but it's what other liberals suggest, that there's some racism in the hiring practices when, like, for example, we talk about women in the workforce, and that's something that's really being pushed, not just by the left, but also by the right. And the whole narrative that a woman makes 70 cents on the dollar or whatever it is, 80 cents on the dollar to a man. The reason that you have less women in higher positions is because, A, the choices they make in life. Many women choose to have children, and that takes them out of the workforce. But also the choices in what degrees to make, right? People who get degrees in sociology or psychology would be great to be a social worker or a psychologist, not exactly a great launching pad for the business world. Right. So the data shows that men are much more likely to choose to study things that will lead to these higher paying jobs, much more likely to go into STEM fields, right? Much more likely to go into business school. And that's not because women are applying to business school and being rejected. It's because women, by and large, are not applying to business school. So when you look at, and it's great that the company has a large amount of women in the workforce, it's a diverse workforce, that's great. But the absence of that diversity is not necessarily a sign of racism. It's a sign of a lack of applicants, a lack of qualified applicants, which is why when I hear stories, not just what you're telling, but other people who say, oh, the only reason I can't get a job is because I'm black or because I'm Hispanic or because I'm Asian. I don't hear that one as much, but the only reason I can't get a job is because of my skin color. And then I look at their resume and they're not qualified, right? That can become a very convenient excuse for a lack of qualifications, which is what I'm saying. And to say that it's white privilege, which is not an argument you're making, but it's an argument the left is making, say it's white privilege, that's why black people aren't working in the tech industry. That's why women aren't working in business, because white male dominance, white male privilege. It just, the data doesn't support it. And I just have a hard time looking past the data. Anyone who can show me that in all aspects of life, it is better to be white than black, I'm happy to enjoy the conversation. And I'm happy to entertain the option. The problem is that there's so many instances where white people are pretending to be black, where black people or people of other ethnicities get benefits because of their ethnicity, right? So there's just so many instances. I can't buy it. I can't buy into it. Now other people might see that with their own experiences. I just cannot. I wanted to play this last clip because
we have a caller too.
Okay.
And, you want to bring the caller on? Yep. All right, let's bring the caller on. Who is it? Sorry, state your name.
Annie McGuire.
Hi, Annie McGuire.
That's my wife.
Is she allowed to call up in this?
I don't think she's allowed to call in.
Yeah, I don't think so. Do you have something you want to contribute, Annie McGuire?
All I wanted to all I wanted to contribute was bringing up my inner city teaching experience. My husband can
Because Joe
attribute
brought
all
that up
that.
the other day.
Yeah, I brought
Yeah,
that
I
up
think
the
this
other
is
day.
super pertinent in the fact that I was trained in how white privileged I was 10 years ago. So I think that's just a flip side to all this argument is how we're trained to that we are terrible people and we have to go out and fix everything. And then I was scared out right out of the inner city teaching because I was like basically forced out because I had such a terrible experience.
Well, so why did you have a terrible experience?
Because we weren't accepted. We were taught that our job was to go out there and like we were terrible people and that we had to make a difference, and we weren't accepted by those that we were teaching and the parents and the families and the communities. It's not a uniform thing across the board, but I think that's a good point to bring up in all of this is that people are forcing us out there and then they don't want the help or they don't like us or, however they perceive it.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in, Annie McGuire.
Yeah, thanks for the call,
Appreciate
Annie. Yeah, so she wanted to call in, Joe, because you talked about her work experience in the past, and she wanted to chime in about that. But no, she's right, and it's the element of being taught to feel shame for your whiteness. That's ultimately what's behind this whole idea of white privilege. It's not just the idea that if you're white you have a better interaction with police. It's a narrative that's being pushed in our early schools, right? In elementary school, in middle school. It's this idea that you should be ashamed of your whiteness because white people are responsible for slavery. And if you're white, you need to apologize to anyone who's black, not just for the benefits conferred to you today, but for your historic benefits for your ancestors. And that's where I'm out. You lose me on that one because it is illogical to require someone to feel shame or apologize for owning slaves when they were never owned slaves. People in their family never owned slaves. Listen, when slavery was in the United States, 95% of the people did not own slaves. Right?
This is true.
So to force
that's
someone
not
to
the
apologize
narrative. But that's
for
not the
something they
narrative.
didn't do,
Right.
and apologize to someone who was never a slave.
Well, you do realize
that's the issue.
Yeah, you do realize that every group seems to have so you have the gay population that says that they're marginalized. You have blacks say they're marginalized. You have Hispanics say they're marginalized. You have women that say that they're marginalized. Old people, marginalized, right? I don't think there's a group out there that's not marginalized. I don't. And whites included. I think they're marginalized in a lot of areas.
Here's the thing. If everyone is marginalized, then there's no such thing as marginalization. Because if everyone is in the margins, then there are no margins. And
I think that's my point.
Ultimately the
I think
point.
that's my point.
If everyone is marginalized, if you can talk to everyone, say, oh yeah, I'm marginalized, and you've pushed every single ethnicity, both genders, into the margins of that paper, right? You cannot argue that there is marginalization because it defeats the whole term. Marginalization is the idea of pushing one group aside. If everyone's being pushed aside, then no one has any benefits. There's no such thing as white privilege. There's no such thing as black privilege. If every ethnicity, every race can point to examples where they feel they've been marginalized, which we've talked about a bunch of them today. I mean, Asian people are also discriminated when applying to universities and colleges. Even though they have excellent grades, they're being discriminated against. It's across the board. So I don't buy the idea that there's marginalization if every ethnicity, every race can lay claim to being marginalized. I want to play this clip because this illustrates how stupid the argument over white privilege has become. These are three young ladies who go out in D.C. and decide to try and wipe away graffiti on federal buildings, and they are being shamed for it because they're white, because of their white privilege. Let's play cut 3.
Why are you guys removing Black Lives Matter's graffiti?
We're just trying to take care of the city. Yeah, we tried over there and it wasn't coming off. It's still one of those coming off.
But why do you want that to come off?
Well, because this is a federal building. Yeah, it's just the vandalism in our city.
But so you don't care about Black lives then?
Not at all. That's not at all what we're saying.
That's what this,
We certainly do care about Black lives.
not enough to leave up a message.
We don't disagree with the message, ma'am. It's just on the building. We're just trying to clean it.
great. Not a great way to use your white privilege, ladies. Not
Oh my
great.
gosh.
That's disgusting.
That's disgusting. Not a good way to use your white privilege
To clean
try
up
and
your-
clean up vandalism on a federal building.
And by the
An
way,
actual
that's
federal building.
the sickness by itself, is the fact that we're not willing to hold people accountable for bad behavior. Like, that's the problem. The problem is not the message, right? The problem is not the fact that George Floyd was killed. I mean, that was terrible, and it was a bad cop. That was terrible. My problem is that you think that justifies why you can act like an a-hole and do things to your community and destroy things. That's my issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we've had protests all over Colorado, and I have shown up to those protests to keep the peace. Police officers can't do anything, but we certainly could. And we warned everyone. We're
Yeah.
like, look, if you guys get out of hand, the first person that puts a spray can on something or breaks a window is getting their teeth kicked in. We literally told the communities this. And so I had organizers that called me and said, so you inciting violence? I was like, 100%. You come to my community and you break something. You take something away from someone that worked really hard, that built that. And you know what? Fight's on. You want to have a discussion about how you feel, right? And you want to protest peacefully and walk the street, you're fine. You come to our community, right? Because you transplant. You came down to a different community inside of our environment. You're not from here, right? And you want to come in here and destroy and do something to our community. Good luck, because I told the police that. I mean, I had conversations with these groups, and I had conversations with the police, and I said, look, I'm not going to apologize, and neither are the 200 people that we invited down there to protect these businesses. So, I mean, this whole idea, I mean, you started with defunding the police, then we got into white privilege. The reality is, take responsibility for who you are as a person. That's really the message you put out there. But that's not a convenient message, Max. So the loony left and the loony right, that's not convenient for them. It's not convenient for them. So we got to wrap up here at some point too, because I got people waiting for me.
So I think that you actually agree with me more than it's coming across, that white privilege doesn't exist, because what you just mentioned was that you want to kick someone's teeth in if they come into your community and take something that someone else earned, which is a completely valid thing to say, right? These people earned what they have. No one should be able to come in and take it away from them. Right. And I think what's being lost is that's what the white privilege argument is suggesting, that everything you've earned in life is because of your white privilege. And not only should you feel shame for it, not only should you apologize for it, but you should give some of it up because you don't deserve it, because you earned it because of your whiteness. And that other people deserve some of the fruits of your labor because they didn't have an opportunity to build what you've built or to earn what you've built because of the color of their skin. That's what the full white privilege argument is. And I think that we're more in line on that. We can talk about the individual instances of discrimination or racism, and where those exist, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with you. But when it comes to white privilege, the idea that if you earn something, you only earned it because you're white and you should give it away to someone else, that's where I think we're in line, that it makes no sense. Any final words, Joe?
Final words are courage and just take responsibility for yourself, right? And replace all these stupid people in politics and leadership who don't have any backbone and definitely don't stand up for the people that represent themselves. Just replace them.
And I'll finish this with saying that I think it's awfully interesting that for years Democrats have said no one needs to own a gun because the police are there to protect them, and regular citizens have no need for semi-automatic weapons. That's something that belongs to police. And now in the very next breath, they're trying to get rid of the police. So you can't defend yourself, and the police aren't allowed to defend you either. And if you expect the police to show up at your home if you're being burglarized, that's white privilege. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts as well as the Google Play Store. You can also find us on the Podbean app as well as conservative-daily.com/podcasts. We do take calls, so make sure you call when we're live on Facebook and YouTube. You can watch our live streams there with videos. Do call in. Our number is 888-441-1121. You can leave a message outside of the regular hours. That's fine. We listen to them. And just join the show. Call in. We read the comments in real time, and we've been getting a lot more comments lately. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all fight together.